His name's Phil.
And his name's Tim.
And this is Tim and Phil Talk About Games.
A podcast where Tim and myself get together and talk about games we have recently played and discuss topics in the world of gaming.
This week we strap on a sword, ready up our sorcery, and delve back into the good old days of CRPGs with the latest Kickstarter success, Divinity Original Sin.
We'll be discussing the game's ins and outs, but also questioning the notion of hand-holding in video games. How much is too much? Alright, yes, that's correct. We are once again back here to record another episode of the Tim and Phil Talk About Games podcast. We'll also be obviously broadcasting this to YouTube at some point in the future. Today we are talking about Divinity Original Sin. We're just doing one game this week. That might be a little bit weird to long-standing listeners to the podcast and watchers of the videos, but we kind of... speaking for myself, I've only been playing this game.
Yeah, as I said, the simple fact of the matter is that we just haven't played anything else. We've spent the last week and a half pretty solidly playing Divinity Original Sin.
Yep, and it's obviously got a lot to talk about. A lot of talk has been going around the game, a lot of buzz around the game. It's been getting some really great reviews around the place. So we wanted to dig into it and kind of give our impressions on what makes it... what I believe a contender for Game of the Year. Tim has some differing opinions about that. But
I certainly wouldn't say it's contending for Game of the Year, but I mean, I don't know. I guess what else there to compare against for the rest of the year?
Yeah. Exactly. So, so we'll be reviewing that, but we'll also be kind of taking a step back from the game itself and just analysing the growing trend in games to kind of hold your hand, to make sure that the player doesn't miss any content or is never left scratching their heads. Because we've kind of noticed it recently, or at least Divinity really threw it into stark relief about the fact that, you know, you didn't really get very much hand-holding from the game. So we're going to kind of talk about kind of difficulty levels, like how games are designed nowadays, that kind of stuff, and kind of hopefully try and get some kind of discussion about games that don't hold your hand and don't expect you to, or that don't accommodate players to the fullest extent, we should say.
Sure.
Yeah, before we get started with that, do have a shout out to do today, or a couple of shout outs, but only one specific one. So we got a new Facebook follower, Lily Cherry. Thank you very much for following us, liking us on Facebook. We hope that you enjoy the content that you find there. We also got a whole bunch of YouTube followers.
But it doesn't tell us what your names are.
No, that was coming from a video that Tim did on Star Citizen. It was kind of a review of a weapon, I think it was. It was a very specific review. It was very cool. But yeah, that got a bit of attention, which was nice. And we got probably about half a dozen new subscribers, which was really cool. Unfortunately, the way that YouTube works, unless people have their profiles set to public, they don't really show up on our subscriber list. So we can't tell who was already following us and who has followed us recently. So we're just going to do a big blanket thank you very much for subscribing to our YouTube channel. We do really appreciate it. And we'll hopefully continue to give you high quality, awesome
content
analysis
to subscribe to in the future.
Yeah, exactly. Stuff that will make you not unsubscribe and disgust. Cool. Well, with that all done, we should get onto the game. It is called Divinity Original Sin. It was published by... I can't remember the name of the developer. It comes up at the start of every game. It was a Kickstarted...
yeah, it was a Kickstarter project. It was probably one of the more recent Kickstarters. In fact, the time going from completion of the Kickstarter to time of release was incredibly short. The game was successfully funded April last year, which is 2013. Mm-hmm. And the game is out in its 1.0 form, or 1.0.1 form, I think it is at the moment, in July of 2014. So it's one year to go from, essentially, I mean, what you can assume is nothing, although they probably had various amounts of sort of prototype gameplay at the point of starting the Kickstarter. But going from, you know, an unfunded project to a completed product in 1 year is very impressive, and I think is a really good reaffirming sort of example of the Kickstarter model. I know a lot of games with the Kickstarter model, like a lot of them get bogged down with feature creep. But also, a lot of them, I mean, people, I guess, don't necessarily understand just how long it takes to make a game.
Yeah, exactly.
Games aren't something you can just pop out, usually, in just 1 year. I mean, if you look at the AAA market, and I mean, I would say that Divinity Original Sin, it's at least AA. I mean,
oh yeah,
it's probably a battery that you can buy for Christmas.
From, if this came out as like a between titles, like say between a large AAA series like Dragon Age or something like that, if this was the off-season release of one of those big AAA developers, then I imagine that it would be like it wouldn't be blinked at that they had developed it.
No,
I should say so. The developers are Larian Studios, and it says here for the Kickstarter they actually used the Kickstarter to expand the content and introduce a whole bunch of systems that weren't necessarily in the game yet. So they would have been, I guess, let's say 60% complete with the game, but they wanted to use it to make the world bigger and make the gameplay mechanics more fully fleshed out. So that's that's an interesting way of using a Kickstarter.
It is. But that's like, the thing is, if you look at games like, for example, any of the Elder Scrolls games, which are a series that I have a vast amount of knowledge on, the Oblivion, Morrowind, Skyrim, all these games, they took minimum 4 years to be produced. There's certainly 4 years in between games when it comes to the Elder Scrolls series. But even then, they've started the next one before they've even finished the one that they're currently producing.
Yeah.
So games in general have long development cycles, and 4 years is not unusual for a development cycle for a game. So for a game to come out in just 1 year is, I think, really impressive. I think it's a good example of using the Kickstarter model to get something out.
Yeah, for sure. So the game itself, if you hadn't kind of heard about it, or if you are completely oblivious to what kind of game it actually is, it's a sequel to an old game called Divine Divinity, which was actually a name
the stupidest name.
You know what? I remember Divine Divinity coming out, and I remember looking at that name and going, it doesn't matter how good this game is. I can't play a game with a name like that. I'm sorry. It's just really bad.
To be fair, Divinity Original Sin, not that much better.
Not that much better, and also it has the unfortunate attribute that it shortens down to DOS.
Which is Disk Operating System. For those of you, maybe your first computer was an iPad.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Get off my lawn. So the game is obviously it's an RPG, so it's a role-playing game. It's kind of the genre that people used to refer to as CRPGs, which was literally just computer role-playing game.
Because this is a game genre that came out at a time when being on a computer was different.
Yeah, it was acronym worthy. It was inclusion in an acronym worthy. It was a computer role, not one of those regular role-playing games. It was a computerized.
There is no board. There are no cards. There is no shuffling.
Yeah. So this is a genre that was typified by such games. Like it's all kind of based on D&D. So if you've never played Dungeons and Dragons, which is a real life role playing game where you have your character sheet and you pretend to do all sorts of stuff, and you have the person that runs the story and gets you through there. Both Tim and myself have played a lot of D&D. Tim way more than me, but so these were games that were based on the Dungeons and Dragons rule set. And they were kind of renowned for being really huge games in which you could do a lot. Like, not an infinite amount, but a lot. And they were known for, like, their fiendish puzzles and their, like, really very inclusive leveling up system and all that kind of stuff. So you're talking about your Baldur's Gate 2, Shadows of Arm, which was just an incredible game, and if anyone hasn't played that game, I highly, highly, highly recommend you do, because I spent, hundreds of hours playing that game. Really, really fantastic. Planescape Torment is another one that's usually cited, and then you move on to your more 3D generation of stuff like Neverwinter Nights.
Neverwinter Nights is a really big one.
Fantastic game. Icewind Dale, all those kind of games where the story is linear, but the world is so large and the mechanics allow you to do such things that you would see in Skyrim and games like that, where it's, you're able to steal from people, you're able to, just straight up murder people, and somehow
it wasn't exactly a sandbox game, but
No.
it was a game where you did have a huge amount of option and variety in the path you take to get somewhere.
Yeah. So, and this is no exception here. So the basic storyline that I've found so far, so I've put around about 20 hours into it. Tim's put, I think, roughly about the same, 20, 25.
Yeah, somewhere in there.
The storyline goes that basically there's kind of evil wizards called sorcerers, and that's spelled Sourceero.
I like to think of it. I like to think of it that the sorcery with the U is like the English version of sorcery.
Yeah, ye oldie sorcery. Yeah,
sorcery.
Sorcery. So there's sorcery around, and all the people that use it, they used to be good, but now they're all evil, and they use the source, which is like magic, to basically do evil things. And you've been called to a town called Cyseal. You've been called to a town called Cyseal to solve a murder, which is thought to have been perpetrated by someone using the source. And you are what they call a source hunter. So you are any one of any combination of classes, and you've been sent to this town in order to solve the murder. That's basically the start. Obviously, very quickly it turns into a kind of pretty epic tale of, the world's going to end and only you can save it, and very classic RPG tropes. But these aren't, it's an RPG game. It's unabashedly a CRPG game where obviously they're not just going to say, well, you've solved the murder. That's that.
Congrats.
So they do lay it on pretty early that there's going to be a more overarching storyline, but having said that, you do still need to solve the murder. Like, that is actually part of the whole development of the game, is that, there are obviously more than just the main storyline quests. There are, I think I've gotten into about 20 or so quests in the first town. It's pretty full. And very wide-ranging. A lot of random different things that you can do, a lot of people you can talk to. But yeah, we should talk about just the fact that you start off with 2 characters, because I think that's really interesting.
So this is kind of the standout mechanic that makes it sort of break away from similar games, like, for example, your Neverwinter Nights and your Dragon Age Origins and all the rest of it. So it's not different in that you have 2 characters as a party, but the fact that you create 2 characters, so that these 2 characters are both your avatar in the game.
Yeah.
So in a game like, for example, Dragon Age, which is probably a good example because it has a lot of similarities to Divinity, but also because it's a recent game that I guess a lot of people hopefully have played. If you haven't, you should, because Dragon Age Origins was a really, really good game. So in these games, you make a character, and that character is your avatar into the world. That's the way that you interact with the world. Over the course of the game, you build up a party of different characters that you've met along the way, and they join you on your quest. Very Lord of the Rings style. You have my axe and my sword. And so the difference with this game is that you create 2 characters at the beginning, and they are both your avatar in the game.
Yeah.
So when there comes up to be, for example, things like dialogue, rather than just having one character, which is you saying, this is my opinion, you have 2 different characters, which are both talking in dialogue, sometimes just to each other, but you control both of them. So you have this bizarre interplay between 2 different parts of your own self, I guess.
Yeah.
It's almost like having split personality disorder.
Yeah, but it's so cool. Like, I found this probably... This was the thing that actually got me, like, dragged me into the game. And it's such a simple device, but for some reason, like, the fact that I had to roleplay... I think it's the thing of when you've just got one character, right? When you've just got the avatar, your word is law, and you never question it. You select the response that you think is the most appropriate, and then the conversation continues. Whereas in Divinity, you select the dialogue option that you think is most appropriate, and then your other character can gainsay that.
Yeah.
And you're still choosing to gainsay it, but it kind of encourages you to RP, like roleplay your characters a little bit. So the way that I've made my characters, so I have when you first make your 2 source hunters, your 2 characters, you do have the option of making them any gender you like. any class you like. There are set classes, so there's stuff like your traditional rogue, ranger, witch, elementalist, all the classic knight, etc. Yeah, so there's all your classic tropes and that kind of stuff, but you can completely customize everything. You can go in and you can take away points, you can put in points, etc., etc. So it's not like you're limited to that kind of thing. I went through, I think I ended up with a traditional rogue plus a ranger that could also cast spells. So it's kind of like I don't know, the way that I roleplayed it is that I have a rogue who is just out to, get money, kill people that stand in her way, and, she doesn't take any crap. And then I have my ranger who's much more touchy-feely and, is genuinely concerned about the plight of people and that sort of stuff. So the way that I roleplay it in dialogue is that, the rogue will be like, no, I don't care, this guy's complaining, let's just kill him. And my ranger will be like, no. But then what happens is that if you gainsay yourself, it goes into a little mini game where you have a rock, paper, scissors to determine who gets the final say and who actually makes the decision as to what you're going to do going forward. So it's just a clever little design trick to make you question the way that you're responding and also bring you into the world a lot better so that you can actually really embrace that role-playing of your characters a bit more. I think it's really, really clever.
Yeah, me too. So my two characters are, I have a ranger-style character, which is called a warden. So it's like half ranger, half spellcaster sort of thing. Very druidy. It's the closest I can get to druid, which is my personal favorite class. And I had a spell sword, I think. She's a battle mage style. So they're both female, and in my sort of lore of the game, they are sisters who live out in the wilds, essentially, sort of shun civilization because they're tired of people's bullshit. So in no way a reflection of my own mental states.
Definitely not.
And so the funny thing for me is that in most cases they agree with each other. In some cases I make them disagree because either I feel that one of them would have a differing opinion to the other on a specific choice, and sometimes I just like using the rock paper scissors argument mechanic.
It's pretty cool.
But see, at times it's really cool. Sometimes I feel it can be a little bit ham-fisted because when you have them agree with each other, it sounds really awkward and weird. They get really sort of,
Like they when they agree with each other, they really
agree.
They're like, yeah, you're totally right.
You're the
That's
best.
Exactly how
you're
I
the
feel.
best.
Yeah.
I love you more.
High fives all
no,
around.
I love you more.
You hang up. Hey, you hang up.
It's very, very awkward.
It's a little bit cheese, but I mean, just having the mechanic in there in the first place, and the fact that it did drag us in, obviously yourself as well, like it does drag you in quite a bit, I think is
you
worth
also
the
can
occasional
do this
cheese.
mechanic against NPCs as well. I mean, there are times when you'll be talking with an NPC and you disagree with what the NPC says, and then you go into the rock paper scissors mechanic as well, which is pretty cool. And you can lose in that sense.
Yeah, exactly.
Like, the NPC can win, which is a really interesting. Like, I liked that. When I was in a situation where I lost a rock paper scissors match against an NPC, and their opinion was considered more important than my opinion, I was like, at first I was like, what the hell? I'm the player. How is your opinion more important than mine? But on reflecting on it, I was like, that was actually really cool. Like, I wish more games had situations where maybe you don't win in a conversation dialogue system.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
No, I think it's really, really cool. And the other thing that we should mention is the fact that the game is co-op. And
in a bizarre way.
Well, not really that much of a bizarre way, I don't think. What do you mean?
Well, okay, so the co-op system is that you create your game, and then someone else can join your game and play one of your characters.
Yeah.
See, that to me doesn't really scream co-op.
Although we haven't tried, that's the thing, we haven't tried making just a multiplayer game. Like, we've made single-player games, which then we allow people to join. I think a multiplayer game might actually allow you to create different characters. I think.
I know, I tried that. The person who starts the multiplayer game creates the two characters, and it just ends up being
really?
the same. Yeah. So it's
Well, I mean, the thing is, you could just sit there and do what we're doing in Mumble and just go, okay, well, I'm creating the character. Can you tell me what you want out of it?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Totally.
That'd be fine.
But the point is, you have to work around their mechanics to get it to work that way. So it's co-op in the sense that you can play with another person cooperatively. But I wouldn't necessarily call it true co-op because the other person doesn't have their own character, their own little avatar in the system, which kind of frustrates me a little. But then, see, I guess I understand that if you didn't have it that way and that person wasn't there, then you would never be able to continue the game unless you took control of their character. There are some weird asynchronicity issues that you'd have to overcome.
Well, I feel like it's the kind of co-op where you drop in, drop out kind of thing. Like, it's kind of cool. Like, I had some... I've dropped into your game and I've dropped into another friend of ours game. And it was cool just to drop in and see, like, what their choices were and to work and to see what their, like, you know, what their battles looked like and what decisions they made.
Oh, it's very voyeuristic in that sense.
Yeah. But it's kind of cool, but... Yeah, I get what you're saying about it not feeling like true. I think maybe they'll implement that.
Oh,
I think
look, maybe.
If enough people tell them about, like, hey, I would just like to take my character, like one of my main characters into this game rather than having to adopt every character in their game. Anyway, so we should talk about the combat, because the combat's actually one of the things that I really
well, the
like
combat's
about
what keeps me playing despite all the technical problems that I'm having with the game. I know that you've never had issues, but...
No.
No? You have had issues? Or you haven't?
Sorry, no, I haven't.
Okay.
No, I haven't had
So I've had the game crash out on me a good number of times. I've had random freezes, slowdowns, just bizarre behavior. But then again, I also get that with Titanfall. So, I mean, this is not a problem with, you know, a budget game or an inexperienced developer. Although, that said, when I get a crash in this game, I get an option which I've never had before, and that is to debug the game.
Really?
Yeah. So it brings up a little debug screen, which I thought was really cool. And it looks like it is, in my case anyway, it looks like it is exception handling with the graphics adapter occasionally missing a step. So it looks like it occasionally goes out of sync with the graphics adapter, and there just is no exception handling for that particular system. So
screw up.
Yeah. So yeah, I mean,
so
despite that, the combat is what gets me back into the game because the combat is really cool.
Yeah, it's really, really fun. So it's it's turn-based, but not sort of grid-based. So whereas in old school games like Baldur's Gate and that kind of stuff, it was all real-time on timers, but you could pause the game. Here it is really just turn-based. Like, one person has a turn, the next person has a turn, the next person has a turn, then the enemy has a turn, then the enemy has a turn, then the enemy has a turn. Depending on initiative, so depending on how fast and...
So it's the generic D&D initiative roll, and whatever order you've rolled your initiative in, that is the order it progresses.
That it goes in, unless you get stunned or frozen or whatever.
Yep.
So what happens is that every turn, depending on your stats, you have a certain amount of action points to spend. And every action that you might take from... you know, swinging a sword, to drinking a potion, to casting a spell, to
picking up an object on the ground.
Picking up an object on the ground, firing stuff at objects, will all cost a certain amount of action points. So, you know, a typical turn might be use 4 or 5 action points to get within the range of of an enemy, and use, like, say, 2 action points to hit them. And you might have a total of 6 or 7 action points that turn, so that ends your round. Now, where it gets interesting is that you can save up action points. And as long as you have up to a maximum, and the maximum is determined again by stats that you can increase and that you can muck with items and armor and that kind of stuff. So you can kind of save up action points rather than spending them, so that you can spend them all in one big turn doing like a whole bunch of damage. The other really, really cool thing about the combat is that it's very environment interactive.
Yeah.
So I think you had an example with oil or something like that.
Yeah, I mean, it's,
Tim, or
so the environment stuff is I think one of the coolest parts of the game, and to me it really evokes Magicka, the hack and slash screw over your friend. I don't know what you would call that. Just Magicka is an insane game. It is like looking into the mind of a developer who has lost his mind and ended up in some
Or
sort of
who's just-
asylum.
Who's just totally fed up with people in RPGs, like,
Yeah.
killing him over and over again.
So it's a really cool system where you essentially, the game is all about playing on the elements. So you've got your 4 elemental system: earth, fire, wind, water, heart, go planet. There's no heart, but there is earth, wind, fire, and water. And so what you've got is, not only do you have a type system like in Pokemon, where you might say that, you know, water is good against fire. You have, it goes way deeper than that, where you might be able to combine fire and water to make steam, for example.
Yeah.
And then you might be able to combine steam and air to make lightning. And so there's this bizarre sort of almost real-time alchemy that you have to play on the battlefield, where you might have, like, for example, a barrel full of oil. So your archer might, or your warrior might crack open this barrel full of oil, spilling oil all over the ground. And then your archer might send a flaming arrow to ignite the oil, which then does burning damage to everyone who's standing in it. Or one of the tactics I use regularly is that my wizard casts a rain spell, which makes it rain, which then
Make it rain!
not only makes the characters wet, but it also will collect puddles of water on the ground where there's low elevation. And I'd be really keen to look at their code to see what determines the elevation in that game, because it seems really quite clever and intuitive as to how the water pools. But then once it's pooled water, you can then fire a lightning bolt into the pool of water. So rather than attacking the enemy, which might be out of range from you, you can create pool of water, fire the lightning bolt into the pool of water, which then makes the entire pool of water electrified, which then zaps the enemy, which might be around a corner. And it's really cool little sort of plays on that elemental system that it makes combat seem very tactical and alive, and every time you are in a combat scenario, it plays out differently.
Yeah, absolutely. And the thing is, like, a lot of people have complained that the combat is a little hard, and we'll get to that. We'll get
Screw
to the
those people. I love hard
probably.
things.
Well, no, I bet you do. Not necessarily. We'll get into why maybe that might have, that might be something that you might run into if you play this game. But the thing is that the combat really encourages you to think more than one step ahead.
Yeah.
And I think that people aren't necessarily like thinking like that at the moment, because I found that when I first started and I was first going through the first few battles that you have where there's not some scripted event that allows you to kill them really easily, when you first actually run into a proper mob out in the wild, I found myself just doing my normal attacks, like just fire an arrow at him, or use my sword to hit him, or something like that. Whereas the game really encourages you to use everything at your disposal, because the wizards, like all your spellcasters and that kind of stuff, all they spend is action points.
Yeah.
It's not like you have a mana pool that can run out. They really want you to use your abilities as much as possible, and you really do need to, because the enemy does.
Yeah.
They don't mess around.
They don't hold back.
They really don't hold back, and oh my god, I hate archers so much. Because what they, like, one of the things that archers have, and what your archer can have if you do have a ranger or an archer type character, is like different kinds of bolts. So you can have like explosive tipped arrows, or poison tipped arrows, or lightning tipped arrows, or stunning arrows, or hammer arrows, or any of these things.
A very large selection of arrows, to be honest.
There are a really lot of arrows that you can use, and they use them judiciously. They will send an explosive arrow into your pack if you are unfortunate enough to be grouped up in a pack at the start of a battle. Start of a battle, I should say. They will send an explosive arrow.
I'm always grouped up in a barrel.
They will send an explosive arrow at your feet and burn your entire party. Like, they won't muck around with that kind of stuff. So it's up to you to really sit there and go, right, I am going to cast a puddle of water at the feet of those archers, and then I'm going to send a lightning bolt down there because it's going to stun them for 3 turns.
Oh yeah, and the stun is super important in this game. Like,
exactly.
You need to, like, if there is a spellcaster or someone that's got a good attack on them, you need to take them out. You need to get rid of them at least for the first couple of turns. You don't need to kill them. Just stop them from hurting you while you get rid of the minions.
The game really encourages you to delay. So delay archers, delay your big hitters. Like, the thing is, so again, we're talking about the combination system. So you can use lightning to stun people, you can use ice to freeze people, But you can modify your chances to be able to do those things by, affecting the environment. So Tim talked about the rain spell. If you cast the rain spell, then people get wet. If they get wet, then if you cast a freeze, like some kind of ice shard on them, like an ice projectile, they have a much greater chance of getting frozen.
Yeah.
And when they're frozen, they can't do anything. You also, the really cool stuff is when, there's just so many subtle effects in the combat. So when something gets frozen, if you tell your warrior to go hack at it with a sword, it'll do heaps of durability damage to your sword.
Oh yeah.
And it also won't affect them that much. But if you tell them to go hit it with a hammer, it does a whole bunch of damage to the NPC mob, and also your hammer doesn't get damaged as much.
The weapon types makes a huge difference. Not even just against that, but even like I found using arrows against skeletons does sweet all.
Yeah, it does nothing. Does absolutely nothing, which sucks because my ranger in the first few areas is just useless.
Yeah.
Because there's only skeletons. But she got better, obviously, because you start facing more humans and stuff like that. And, again, use everything to your advantage. I found myself doing the old RPG trope of just hoarding everything that I have and waiting for like a proper boss fight.
Yeah, you do not want to hoard in this game.
Don't hoard. Use. If there's one piece of advice I give anyone that has a ranger character, use all your arrows. You'll get more of them.
Don't waste them. Like, don't just throw them away. But, like, if you are in a situation where you think, hey, man, a fire arrow would really work well here, then use the fire arrow.
Use it. Yeah. And the thing is that you have to remember that with old CRPGs like this, is that once you kill an enemy, they're gone.
Yeah.
There is no respawning. So investing in, using an arrow to beat a particularly hard battle, or using multiple arrows to, beat a particularly hard battle, means that it's not like you're going to walk back to town, walk back out again and go, oh, well, I've just wasted all my arrows. Yeah, because they respawn. No. Once they're dead, they're dead. And so you really need to... There's less of a incentive to hoard things for a big boss battle because you feel like you're wasting them on the smaller
The other thing is that you dying, while there is resurrection in the game, you dying is a big deal. And if you die, your character doesn't get experience while they're dead, which is a perfectly acceptable and normal thing to say.
Yeah. Exactly.
So if using an ability or a scroll or something that's a one shot only, if that is the difference between one of your characters dying and one of your characters not dying, use it. Because not getting experience is going to hurt you really badly as you get towards the sort of guts of the game, like the middle of the game. Not having having one character that's behind by a couple of levels really ruins your experience.
Yeah, absolutely. So I mean the way that the story and the quests are laid out. So I know Tim, you had some issues with the dialogue and the quests maybe not being up to your
incredibly high standards. My unwarranted and just punishing high standards. Because
I kind of wanted to know about that because I haven't found it too bad.
I
thought they were
the dialogue makes me cringe in most situations. Like it really so many times I'd be like, oh, why did you word it like that? Or it's too floral or too like I get that it's on the nose and it's meant to be on the nose. Like it's kind of like it's a bit of a joke in itself. It's the tongue-in-cheek game. But there are periods where I'm just like, I never want to skip dialogue. But in this game, I find myself skipping dialogue just because I'm like, I can't read what is on the screen right now. Like, it actually hurts me to read some of the lines of dialogue that they've put in the game.
I don't know. I found most of them to be pretty okay. I don't, there's some, I agree. There are some characters that you're like, I kind of want to get away from this person as soon as possible. But I don't see that as necessarily a failing. I mean, it's eliciting a reaction from you.
Yeah, it's eliciting a reaction, but it's not necessarily a good reaction. And I don't know. See, I guess what the feel for me is, and so one of the parts that I had, unlike you, I had to work to get into the game at the very, very beginning. Like, the first 10 minutes of the game did not grab me.
No.
The opening dialogue I found was a little bit weird and loose. I didn't really know why I was there. Like, I felt like the original explanation of your opening sort of motives wasn't particularly well done. And then when I got into the city of Sicil, I found that it was like Yeah, I don't know. It didn't grab me. It wasn't until I got It wasn't until I'd done a bunch of really frustrating fetch quests in the city. After I'd done that and leveled up a little bit, and then got out to some real combat, I felt like it didn't really grab me. So another thing is that I think that maybe the game needs more combat early on, before it hits you with some of the heavy dialogue, because there are a bunch of quests early on that just require you to read a lot of text and then go talk to somebody else who gives you some more text and then make a choice based on the text that you read, which is great, and I'm all for that in a game. But I felt like my appetite wasn't wet enough before, it hadn't been wetted before I got in there.
Right. Yeah, because I guess a common complaint, and I guess this is where we're going to get onto the point about the level capping being kind of a little bit of an issue, is the fact that when you hit that first town, after you've done a few of the first little tutorial cave thing, and a little bit of that stuff, the town, you really do need to do quite a few of the quests in the town before you can really venture out. Not all of them, but you need to at least have gotten to, say, level 3 before you leave to go and fight
even
some
then,
monsters.
I left the town gates at level 3 and got reamed. Absolutely reamed. Yeah, but
I did as well, but then I think that's around about the point in time where the combat turned for me, and I thought, oh wait, I've got to, there's a barrel of ooze there. I've got to use that barrel in order to beat this fight. I've got to make sure that I use all the skills that I have available to me. I've got to make sure I hire the 2 people that are in town. I can't.
See, that was another thing. I didn't even come across those 2 people initially. So the first attempt I had leaving the town was just with my original 2 characters.
Yeah, me too. Yeah, and you get absolutely just
reamed.
Bent over.
So
you do get smashed.
Now another problem I had with the game is that those 2 characters you pick up, I don't know if you get to pick up more later on or what the deal is, but
yeah, you will. Yeah.
Those 2 characters do not gel with me. I didn't want them in my party. I spoke to them like, wow, you're a dick and you're crazy. So, I don't think you have any place in my party.
Yeah, it's a little bit frustrating that you can't just pick. Well, okay, I should say that actually, and I'll avoid any spoilers here, but there is a place you can go to really early on in the game where you can just hire
the Hirelings.
Yeah,
right.
You can just hire random people, and they all have little backstories, but you can find people that might have a little bit better fit with your party.
Yeah.
And I think that is a concession to the idea that maybe people wouldn't want a crazy person and a bit of a douchebag.
But see, the problem I then have is that the Hirelings have no personality. They are just cardboard cutouts that follow you around and do damage and soak damage.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I appreciate that they are there, but seriously, nah.
But if you think back to games like Baldur's Gate and that kind of stuff, you didn't have much of a choice early on in the game. You literally met a couple of people that you kind of incidentally came across on your storyline, and you didn't. They kind of.
The difference with Baldur's Gate is that those characters weren't dicks.
Yeah, I know, that's the thing. I guess that they kind of. I think Baldur's Gate worked it a little bit better because the first couple of characters that you ran into were what's his name? The big barbarian guy with Boo.
Oh yeah.
Oh god, I can't remember his name.
It's been too long.
I know, but you ran into him and a fairly unoffensive girl next door type magic user. So they were people that.
It was totally not one of my first gaming crushes.
Yeah, definitely not. So they were kind of a little bit more.
Right,
feasible and non-offensive. Whereas I guess it's kind of setting the tone for the world. These people are really extreme, and most of the people in the game are pretty extreme.
But they're also kind of irreverent in their extremity, which I find to be a little, again, on the nose, a little frustrating to have to work with.
Yeah. I don't know. I don't mind them too much, and the simple fact is they barely really make any impact on the game. They are really just mercenaries. I haven't really had them talk that much. I think the crazy demon hunting lady made some comment after we killed something, but that's about it. Didn't really say anything. Didn't affect anything stats wise or decision wise or anything like that. So it's not too bad. I don't think it's...
No, and I can also see what they're doing because they're also setting up these characters for a tale of redemption
Or some kind of event.
Yeah, because there's
like,
been several points in the game now where I've done something and one of these two party members has been like, I didn't agree with what you just did there. And I've then gone, oh, well, maybe you should think about it like this. And they've gone, maybe I should have thought about it like this. And then on star flies across the screen and it says, the more you know. Boop, 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 boop.
Exactly.
It's very after-school special style.
Yeah, they're obviously trying to get some kind of story out of these characters, and that's fine. That's totally fine. I did want to talk a little bit. Yeah, so obviously the game wants you to do particular things in that first town, and I think a lot of players have been getting a little bit frustrated with that. So I think that players are kind of used to being able to not necessarily do anything, but also it's really hard to explain. The game straddles the line between being able to do a whole bunch of stuff and also wanting you to do things in a certain order, right?
Yeah.
So I think the way that it encourages you to do just about anything is within the town. So within the town, or within the towns, obviously there's more than just the first town in the game. Within towns, generally speaking, you can do basically whatever the hell you want. You can steal stuff from people. You can unlock, pick people's locks on their houses and steal all their stuff. You can murder people. Doesn't really matter as long as you don't get caught. The designers apparently approached the game with the N+1 solutions in mind, whereby you can always complete a quest even with everyone in the world murdered. And that's the +1. Like you can always complete the main storyline, even if you have literally systematically destroyed everybody that you've come across, which you won't be able to do because everyone's like 3 or 4 levels higher than you whenever you encounter them. But they've kind of given you that freedom to look around, to make your own mistakes within the town, and then when it comes to moving outside the town with battles, there seems to be a very specific order that they want you to go to things, and that's basically determined by the level of the mobs that you're facing.
Yeah. So I mean, even now there are a few areas in this first area. Sort of, there are some sub areas where I was looking for more same level experiences to level up my party, and I kept running into these areas which are just maybe 1 or 2 levels above you, and they just completely destroyed you. And it's like, the game is saying you are not ready for this area. You need to go and do something else and then come back here. But I find the problem with the game is that there are too many of those areas for me. Or at least there's so many of them that have little openings from the area that you're in.
Yeah.
So in a game like Diablo 2, which I think was Diablo 2 is kind of the template for a lot of games. Like, it was a game done right on so many levels.
Yeah.
And Diablo 2 at least had the thing where there were areas that were too hard for you, but there was only ever one entrance. Like, it was a very linear game in that sense. Like, if you went into the area that was too hard for you, you knew it was too hard for you, and you came back. Like, you then left that area and went back to the area that was okay for you.
Yeah.
And so the big problem I had with this game is that there are so many places, like, I was just constantly running into areas that were too hard for me, that were pocketed inside areas that were kind of okay for me, and it just seemed really, really weird.
Yeah. I guess it's the thing of, it's not signposted at all.
Yeah.
And so you kind of do have to experiment and go, okay, well, I'm going to try and take on this mob that's 1 level higher than me. And yeah, I'm going to go and like try and, we've got visitors now, but just ignore that for a little while. Yeah, so you try and, sorry, my sister's come over with my niece. So you would go into those areas and not be able to do it. God damn it, we're not going to be able to record. Do you want to stop and then we can do a fade out and then fade back in?
Yeah, sure.
Okay. Alright, yeah, sorry about that. My family did make an unexpected visit. But yeah, we're back. What we were talking about was the fact that sometimes you'll encounter enemies that are like a level or so above you, and ordinarily you would probably, in most games nowadays, you'd kind of expect to be told, yes, you can kind of take on these guys, but with Divinity you really do have to experiment to see whether or not you can take them on.
And most of the times it's no.
Exactly. But so we kind of wanted to talk about this in a little bit more depth. So we've got a little bit of time left in the episode. So we kind of wanted to touch on this, the fact that a lot of games nowadays, it's a very linear, not even in the sense of as in linear versus sandbox, but it's very linear in terms of which areas you can access and which areas...
In terms of progression.
Yeah, in terms of progression. Whereas Divinity is really like... It does kind of give you a lot of space to make your own mistakes. But once you've made those mistakes, it's kind of pretty clear as to which way you should go. Whereas, like, you don't... I guess the thing that a lot of people are having trouble with, in terms of, like, stuff that I've read online, is the fact that people don't have... There isn't the giant exclamation mark above the heads of NPCs to say, you must go here and talk to this person.
I have a quest for you.
Exactly, especially with the very first quest that you get, which is to investigate the murder of a townsperson. There's like nothing to help you do this.
No.
You pretty much walk in and you are in the role of a detective, and I really liked it. The fact that you had to really thoroughly explore that first.
Although this is immediately offset by the fact that to get half the clues you need to be a career criminal, break into everyone's house, read all their most personal belongings and diaries and things, and steal 90% of their stuff. In order to prove their innocence.
in order to prove their innocence, yeah. Now, the thing is that it kind of does encourage that a little bit. I don't think you necessarily have to steal stuff in order to get the main, like,
No, but it's got that
suspect.
atmosphere of once you've broken the rule of, breaking into someone's house. Yeah, while I'm there, I may as well just take all the golden cutlery that's sitting on the table. Why would there be golden cutlery sitting on the table if it wasn't there for me to steal it? Oh, look, I can take all the paintings off the walls and hock them to the guy in the marketplace.
People love paintings. It's crazy.
My characters certainly love paintings.
My characters, they're art collectors. It's insane. But yeah, like, we wanted to kind of talk about, like, so... Do you think that the design choices nowadays tend towards making sure the player knows exactly what they want them to do at every step of the way? Like, it does really feel like that nowadays.
So this is a long-standing debate especially in the game, the Elder Scrolls games, because in Oblivion they introduced this scaling difficulty curve with the NPCs. So that no matter where you were, the NPCs that you were fighting were always equivalent to your level. Like, it was, you were never in a situation where you were like, oh, this is just way too hard. Not so true. There were certain Oblivion doors that, bucked that trend. There are always exceptions to the rule, but that was a thing that they did. It was very controversial at the time. Now,
I thought it was crap.
I actually kind of liked it because it sort of got rid of some of the issues with Morrowind, where there were just some areas where you would walk out of the safety of something and then just get completely, trashed by like a Golden Twilight or one of the high level Daedra.
Yeah.
But then I think they took it too far in Oblivion, to the sense that there were very few areas that made you feel like it was powerful. They're powerful or not powerful. I mean, to feel powerful, you have to at one point not be powerful. Like, you have to compare the two.
True.
So the funny thing was that in looking for a comparison for Divinity for this very podcast, I went through a half dozen games on my Steam list of pseudo recent games that had come out in the past 6 months, looking for another game that was similar to Divinity. And the problem I was coming up with was that every game I came across, they all had this incredibly linear, almost flat power curve. I mean, as soon as you got a little bit stronger, all your enemies got a little bit stronger. There was never this sort of to and fro between you as you sort of figured out, where you were meant to be in terms of your ability levels. I looked through Assassin's Creed, the Black Flag, Assassin's Creed, whatever number we're up to now, 6 or 1200. And then
I think it's 4.
It's somewhere between 1 and Avogadro's number. I'm not.
One day we'll get there. One day.
So even all these games that I was playing, they were all. I mean, they were fun. Don't get me wrong, But
Yeah.
they were games where it was just a series of checkboxes where I was like, well, have I done this? Yes. All right, now you can do this sort of thing. Like, there was always, if you've unlocked this ability, then you're allowed to take on this next level enemy. So there was never a feeling of being particularly powerful or being particularly unpowerful or non-powerful, dispowerful,
Weak?
impowerful.
I think weak is the word you're looking for there.
Unrepowerful.
It's also the thing of like, even like putting combat aside for the moment, like, yeah, you've got that linear scaling with combat, but I think the thing that has really thrown people in Divinity is the fact that there are no signposts, there are no exclamation marks, there's nothing to say, once you've done this, go and do that, and then that'll advance the quest. It's really like, okay, the one of the best examples of this is the recipe system. The recipe system in Divinity, right, is really interesting because usually, okay, so say you're in an RPG and you pick up a recipe book or you read a book somewhere and it goes, recipe added, and it's like in Divinity it's literally a book, like there's writing, it's like a paragraph or two usually of like describing some adventurer who's like, oh yeah, you know, I met this woman and she could cut down a log into an arrow like crazy, and so from that you get the idea that yes, you're supposed to combine a knife and a block of wood and you'll get something out of it. But it comes up with big red letters, big yellow like text saying recipe added, and if you go into your journal, there is actually a recipes tab.
Yeah.
Now, in every other RPG that you've played in the last 3 or 4 years, you would probably expect to open up that recipe tab and have it literally have like 1 times, you know,
1 times dagger
log. Yeah, 1 times dagger plus 1 times log equals whatever it is that you're supposed to get, and like
times
list it
arrow
like that.
shafts.
Yeah, exactly. In this, though, it just replicates the text of what you've just read.
Yeah.
Like, it's not so much a recipe book as it is just a record of all the text that you've read that gives you recipes.
So a good example that I came across with that was that one of the potion making things, it was like, you know, it was really good when I found out that I could add stardust to bone dust and create this magical pixie dust that was really handy in making potions. I was like, oh, that's really interesting. I have bone dust because I figured out early on from one of the other books that you're meant to combine your mortar and pestle and bones to create bone dust, which you shouldn't do, by the way, in real life. Highly carcinogenic. It's incredibly poisonous. No, seriously, bone dust is really bad for you.
Alright.
Just in case anyone, it's a thing.
I don't want to know how you know that or why.
Don't grind bones. Just don't do it. But the point is, I had all this bone dust, this highly carcinogenic bone dust in my inventory. But I'm like, where am I going to get stardust from? And it was quite a while before I realized that I was picking up these star herbs. And I thought, well, what if I combine the star herbs with a mortar and pestle? And sure enough, I get stardust from that. So I didn't even know how to get the stardust, but from the book, it sort of gives you small, subtle hints as to what you should be doing to get the ingredients that you need to progress on in the crafting thing, which I thought was really cool.
Absolutely, and I think half of the appeal of the fact that it doesn't hold your hand is that you actually feel kind of smart when you do figure things out. Like, the sense of achievement is very different to anything I've experienced recently. In other games, when things are really signposted for you, like, most of the time the difficulty is in getting between signposts, right? Like, the difficulty is in how many enemies you have to battle or how quick your reflexes have to be. In this, it's kind of a combination of both, because you've got, first, the thing is you might have to read particular books to find out the information, and as you say, the information might not be literally sitting there in front of you going, look at me, look at me, look at me. It might be 1 sentence in a book that's got like 3 or 4 pages, and you
mostly
find
of red herrings too.
Exactly, yeah. There are books that really point to the wrong thing, especially in the murder thing that you're investigating in the first town. There are actually red herrings in the investigation, and it's the fact that it's a game that doesn't treat you like a complete idiot. It doesn't treat you like a 13-year-old, which, yes, fair enough, it's the target demographic, and we are way too old to be playing most of the video games that we play.
Lies!
If gamers were limited to the demographic that was, initially targeted by the marketing team of the video game, we would never play any games. But this one, it really does seem to, it seems to approach puzzles and approach the way that you're supposed to progress with the expectation that the gamer isn't an idiot and that they will enjoy the intellectual challenge of trying to find out all these different things.
Now, see,
and that is just,
for me, the
it's so
flip
refreshing.
side of that is that while the crafting mechanic was really cool, and I felt this awesome sense of achievement and accomplishment when I figured out how to do the various parts of the crafting, the result of the crafting, almost pointless. There's almost no reason to do any crafting in the game at all.
Well, we don't know that yet, because neither you nor me have actually put that many points into crafting, so maybe later on in the game... Well, yeah, but maybe later on in the game, because obviously they want to keep the power curve, right? They don't want you to be able to go make some beefy crafting person who just crafts things and crafts like a legendary dagger from the start. Obviously they want to reserve that for later on. So maybe later in the game it's a little bit more useful, but at the moment it seems like you pick up enough things out of barrels and off corpses that you're never really going to need crafting.
Well,
but,
so the one cool thing with the crafting was the ability to craft special arrowheads for my archer. So being able to do that was really awesome. Also, there was a recipe that I found that made a vial of poison, and I'm like, well, I don't want to eat that. In fact, even the text was like, all the potions have the text, you can consume this to increase your health, or you can consume this to... It always starts off with, you can consume this to blah, blah, blah. And the vial of poison goes, you can consume that... Wait, no! Which I thought was really cute.
That's cool.
But it turns out I could actually combine the poison vial with an arrowhead to make a poison arrowhead, which I can then make poison arrows, which I thought was really cool. Although they're useless against zombies and the undead, which is what all of the opening area seems to be about. But I'm sure...
I've gotten a little bit, like, that's the west part of the town. Anyway, sorry, we're getting off topic. But yeah, there's more than just zombies to fight. There's zombies, there's humans, there's fire elements.
I would love to figure out how to make fire arrowheads, because I use them a lot.
Yeah, I don't know. I haven't done that yet. But that's the thing, is that you sit there and you go, okay, well, I've made this one thing, so how... And you're kind of constantly thinking, oh, well, how am I going to do that in the future? Like, how am I going to make a fire arrowhead? Like, how am I going to make sure that I have all the supplies I need in order to, get past these pretty difficult battles? And it's kind of... I don't know, it just always seems to be making you want to think, like, and actually engage with the game.
No, I agree. I think this is a really positive part of the game. I just feel like some of the implementation is great, but the result of the implementation is almost trivial in some senses.
Yeah.
There are some cool Easter eggs in the crafting system. I was really quite chortled when I found that if you combine...
Chortled?
Yeah.
That's not an adjective.
No, I chortled.
Oh, you chortled.
I chortled.
Okay, it just sounded like you said you were chortled.
No. I was so chortled.
Oh my god, that's so chortle.
Oh god, don't. No, I chortled when I combined a knife with a pumpkin, just because, why not? And it crafted a carved pumpkin, which was a helmet that you could put on.
Oh,
which
that's cool.
makes your head into a glowing pumpkin head, which induces fear into the enemies.
That's cool.
Yeah, it was a cool little sort of Easter egg. Or the fact that buckets are items that you can pick up, and you've got to use bucket. I'm like, I wonder what happens when you use a bucket. And again, you just put the bucket on your head.
Well, that's the thing. You can use brooms and stuff like that.
There was a long period of time where I was using a broom or a pitchfork for my two-handed weapon because it's all I had. But so cool. There are some really cool parts of the game. I just feel like I said, they've got some really cool components in the game. I just feel could be implemented just that slightly little bit better.
Yeah, and I mean, they are patching stuff. Maybe, in the future there'll be a little bit more, because it went through quite a beta phase, and they cleaned up a lot of stuff through that. They've already released another patch after it had come out in full release, which apparently fixed a lot of stuff. So I have a feeling that there might not be major changes, but I imagine that it'll become more of a smooth experience as you go through, but still retain that, challenge.
So for me, it really closely resembles Dragon Age Origins. That's the ultimate feeling I get. And I guess it's unfair to compare a kickstarted game, like a AA quality title, with Dragon Age Origins, because that game was polished up the arse. Like, it was just so well implemented. Everything about Dragon Age Origins was just really, really well done. Which I think was funny, because that was one of the worst things about Dragon Age 2, was that it wasn't Dragon Age 1. Like, they had set the bar so high for themselves that a whole bunch of things that we would normally have been quite okay with in Dragon Age 2 in comparison were really, really bad because Dragon Age 1 had implemented it so incredibly well.
Yeah,
and one of the big things about that was the dialogue system in Dragon Age 1. The actual mechanics for the dialogue frustrated me, but the dialogue itself was just, top-notch, amazing BioWare level of, really good voice acting combined with really good, sort of impactful dialogue. So
Yeah, for sure.
I feel like if this game had some of that, I would enjoy it a whole lot more. But I already enjoy it a heap, so we're splitting hairs.
Like we said, for a game that needed to be kickstarted in order to kind of reach its vision, I guess. Like that coming from that kind of angle, this is an amazing achievement for them to have
Definitely.
made a game that so evokes the feeling of those old school CRPGs when they first came out. Like it's I will admit that some of the love that I have for this game is because of the nostalgia trip that I'm getting playing it. But I think if I hadn't played those games, I would still be really enjoying this, just because it treats you as though you have half a brain.
Yeah.
And it's not just shinies on the screen kind of thing. So
Very much so.
I really can't recommend it enough for people that love RPGs, that love games that actually force you to get in the world and think as if you're in the world, and people that like RPing. Like, it's a really cool game. I would love...
Yeah.
Sorry.
It sounded like you said people that love peeing.
Love peeing.
Yeah.
Oh, that too.
People that love peeing.
Yeah, just love peeing. People that like role playing and getting into worlds. I feel that this is just a really great game. As I said at the start of the show, I think it's definitely a game of the year contender for me. It's going to be in my top 5, absolutely.
It's a very good game. I would highly recommend it. It's not very expensive, although
that's the other thing. That's the other thing though. It's $40. Like, for a game that I can see myself sinking a lot of hours into. I'm thinking I reckon at 100 hours I'm going to put into this game.
Yeah.
Easily. And enjoying every minute of it, because I just feel that the combat system and the way that they've organised the game is going to reward replayability.
Yeah. I'd say that too.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Anyway, we should
wrap it up.
So thank you very much for listening and or watching. You can find us on the web at www.timandphil.com. That's Tim and Phil, the Phil bit with 2 L's. We are on Facebook as well at facebook.com/timandphil, again with 2 L thing. If you want to contact us directly, however, you can find Tim on Twitter at Dungeon Master. You can add him as a friend on Steam at steamcommunity.com/id/Ageotus, that is AGEOTAS, or at his website, which is CorsairsAnchorage.com.
And you can find Phil on Twitter at ToothSoup. Add him as a friend on Steam, which is the steamcommunity.com/id/Flaxer, FLAXEH. Or you can find Phil at his regular website, which is toothsoup.com. Thanks for listening.
And happy gaming.